Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have the Game Week 9 preview. In this weekly series I take all of your dilemmas and discussion points and do my best to address them and give you the best possible advice that I can. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into today's video. So guys, before we jump into the Game Week 9 preview, I thought I'd just really quickly update you on my Ultimate Champions team and show you what I'm looking like going into Game Week 31. So since the last video, I've actually managed to pack some absolute beasts. So since then, I've packed 4 epic cards, as you can see here. 2 from the Romanian League, and interestingly, I've also packed Fabio Vieira and Kieran Tierney. Now, whilst Vieira and Tierney aren't regular starters, they did actually start 2 weeks ago for me, and they both got some returns. Tierney got the clean sheet, and Fabio Vieira scored. So these 2 in the future could be fantastic options, but for now, because they don't start every week, maybe not the best players to put in my team every single week. I also managed to pack Gabriel the defender, but most importantly, the main man, Gabriel Jesus. So my club is starting to really come together now. So let's take a look at my team ahead of Game Week 31. So guys, I'm just building my team ahead of Game Week 31. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to this guy. So I've just packed him. He's an epic player from Romanian League. He's actually 38 years old, but he's a bit of a machine. If we just look on his profile right now, over the last 5 matches, he's averaged 146 points per game. If we just click on his most recent game, he didn't keep a clean sheet, right? He's a defender, 38, didn't keep a clean sheet, but he managed to pick up a crazy amount of points. And you can see the thing that's so brilliant about Ultimate Champions and the reason that I've been enjoying playing the game so much is different to FPL. If a defender loses their clean sheet and they don't get an attacking return, the most they're going to get is probably 1 or 2 points. Whereas in Ultimate Champions, they'll get points for so many different things. You can see here, head passes, accurate long balls, touches. He's got loads of points for different elements from the game. So just because a defender loses their clean sheet or just because a striker doesn't score, doesn't mean they can't get you a lot of points. And this guy that I've just packed, not only is he an epic card, but he's been a bit of a machine for me. Now, if we're talking machines and the best of the best, I have one of the best players in Ultimate Champions, and if you can get your hands on this card, I absolutely will, and that's Leclerc. Now, he plays in League 2, which is the second French league. He genuinely gets so many points every single week, and it's consistent as well. If we go to his last 5 matches, you can see all green, 153, 196, 216. These are excellent scores in Ultimate Champions. And again, if I click on his profile, in a lot of these, he doesn't even get attacking returns. He just plays so many passes. He makes so many tackles, interceptions. And again, it's the sort of advanced scoring system on Ultimate Champions that means players that aren't necessarily getting attacking returns and clean sheets can still be fantastic owns. And to be honest, almost every single week, I'm going to captain this man because his returns are so consistent. He'll get me that extra points and he'll be fantastic to own throughout the season as well. So guys, just finished out the team. I've got Sumari up front who does score occasionally. His team aren't doing very well, but when they do score, it tends to be him involved. And of course, I've got my main man, Gabriel Jesus, not getting the armband this week because they play against Spurs. I'm not sure how tight that game's going to be. Leclerc's going to get the armband instead. And I've just filled out the bench. You can see I've got Gabriel, Clayton and Spearings on the bench as well. Generally, the team should be pretty good. So let's confirm the team when that loads through. On average, this will score me 1,485 points, which won't quite be enough for the second best rewards, but I'm feeling pretty confident, especially with Leclerc's captaincy. Guys, ignore my pretty low score from last week. It was a bit of like a blank game week as we get in FPL, so I had a few players not playing. But generally, I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of people that are doing really well in the Raptor Mini League. So we've got Tobias in there in first place, absolutely smashing it this season. Really strong team. We've got Gogsy as well, who's been doing very, very well every week. And you got your main man, FPL Raptor, in the third. So I'm still doing pretty well in my league. And if you do want to join my league, please feel free to do so. There will be a link in the description to download and play Ultimate Champion, so you can do that first, and then the second link in the description will take you to join my league. So if you want to play against me and see my team every week, absolutely do that as well. But just a massive shout out to those guys that are actually keeping up with me and doing pretty well, and to Tobias and Gogsy, I'm going to try and catch you this week. So guys, there were a lot of questions around which strikers to pick on Wildcard, which strikers to transfer in for some people, and most importantly, now with the updated news that Alexander Isak is almost definitely out of Game Week 9 again. That's not 100% confirmed at the time of me recording this, but a few journalists in the know and a few journalists for Newcastle seem to suggest that Alexander Isak will be out for a few weeks. A lot of people are now looking at Isak replacements. So what I've done here is I've just listed all of the strikers that you could potentially consider around that sort of Isak price and below. So we've got 4 strikers at 7.2 and every other striker is below that. And I've just got some very basic statistics for them just to have a bit of a chat. So we've got their price, we've got their minutes, projected points from Game Week 9 to Game Week 16, which is right up to the World Cup. We've got their non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90, and we've also got their fixture difficulty from Game Week 9 to 16. So if their fixture difficulty is first, it means they have the best fixtures in the league, i.e. the easiest fixtures up till the World Cup. And if they're 20th, it's the most difficult fixtures. Every statistic that's used throughout this season on my channel, and specifically in today's video, will be from Fantasy Football Hub. If you do want to get access to Fantasy Football Hub, there will be a link down in the description for 30% off. So These are the underlying statistics. I'm not going to go through every player in loads of detail because I do think there are a few standouts, and I think some of these are just non-options. For example, I'm not really seeing a massive amount from Adams and Welbeck. I'm not saying they're bad shouts, but I just think with the fixtures they've got, maybe you wouldn't go for them. And again, Johnson, I know a lot of people are interested in maybe a Forest striker, especially for the next few fixtures, but I just think looking at their fixtures overall, looking at his underlying data, he's not probably an option. I've put Antonio on there, but again, West Ham just haven't shown me enough yet. And Antonio in particular is a slight rotation with risk with Scamacca as well. So there are a few people on here that maybe aren't really options, but there are some really nice ones. So we're going to start with Solanke because he's been getting a lot of attention over on social media, specifically on Twitter. If you're part of the FPL Twitter community, Solanke's being talked about by a lot. There are loads of content creators, for example, Andy, Let's Talk FPL, really thinking about putting Solanke in his wildcard. And I don't dislike this at all. The things that I love about Solanke, and there are a few, he's nailed on for 90 minutes when he's fit pretty much every single game. Will very rarely come off at any point. And if he does, it's probably going to be around sort of 85 to 88 minutes. He's very rarely going to get an early sub. He's on penalties, which really is a big thing. We always talk about non-penalty expected goal involvement. That's because that is more predictable than expecting a penalty. So we remove penalties when we look at it, but you should consider the fact that if someone's on a pen, that is another route to points. And if they get 2 penalties over the next 8 weeks, that's brilliant, right? That's 2 goals immediately for him, assuming he dispatches them. So nailed on for 90 minutes. Obviously, he's on penalties. And the thing that I do love about him is the fixtures. As you can see here, Bournemouth have the best fixtures in the lead up to the World Cup. So for that reason, for those 3 reasons, I really do like Solanke. The things that maybe I don't like as much about him, his underlying statistics aren't great. There has been a slight improvement under the new management. But again, the fixtures have been slightly better over the last 2. That does lean into the fact, though, over the next sort of 8 weeks when the fixtures are really good, Solanke might be a really good shout. And listen, Bournemouth, again, were under different management at the start of the season, and they had pretty tricky fixtures. And the Bournemouth team, as an entirety, had to adapt to the Premier League. So I expect with the new fixtures, with the change in management, and with the decent-ish underlying statistics that we're seeing from Solanke, I'm expecting a slight increase. And I just think at 5.7 million, he'll probably allow you to get an extra premium defender in. Maybe you can go for like James Cancelo Trent. Maybe he'll allow you to get a slightly more expensive midfielder. Maybe you can go from like a Bailey to a Maddison if you make the downgrade to Solanke. So I think for those reasons at 5.7, you probably can't really go wrong with him. But there is someone in here, if you're maybe a slightly more of a risk taker, at 5.7 you could go for, and that's Daka. Looks like a really nice option. His non-penalty expected goal involvement is 0.77, but he's only played 236 minutes, so I wouldn't pay too much attention to that. Very small sample size. I mean, even Solanke is only 402 minutes. The things I like about Daka, the fixtures coming up are fantastic. The underlying data is good whenever he plays. The things I don't like about Daka is, like I said, whenever he plays. The issue you've got is at the moment, Maddison appears to quite often be playing on the right. Barnes will play on the left. So assuming they play sort of a front 3 of some kind, you're probably looking at one of Daka, Iheanacho and Vardy playing up top. And I just think that's too much of a risk. Yes, the last 2 games, I believe Daka's started. Vardy's been dropped to the bench. I don't expect that to continue every single game. So I would worry about Daka's minutes. But if it's more of sort of a short-term punt, and you think Daka will start against Forest and Bournemouth, he could be a great option at 5.7. I've chucked in Burmo in there because look at his statistics. Yes, Tony is the one to own, as we're going to discuss in a second, but 0.63 non-penalty expected goal involvement for 5.9. He's probably better value than Tony. However, Tony's got better stats plus penalties, which is a massive bonus, and he's also slightly more nailed than Mbeumo. But I really like Mbeumo, and if you do still want to get a Brentford player in, despite the fixtures not being great for Brentford, as you can see here, they're 18th on the fixture difficulty ticker, then maybe you go for Mbeumo ahead of Tony if you can't afford Tony. But I just think probably if you're going to go for a Brentford striker, you go for Tony just because of the nailedness, because of the penalties and the slightly better underlying data. The best player on this list by some distance, as you can see, for minutes, projected points, non-penalty expected goal involvement, and the second best fixtures on the list is Mitrovic. So I've had a lot of people talking about, should we take Mitrovic out? Is Mitrovic essential? I don't think he's essential, but I think for 6.9 million, looking at this, his underlying data is still so strong. Highest projected points. He's going to play 90 minutes pretty much every game. He's only missed 2 minutes this season. I think Mitrovic is probably the one to own alongside Haaland. And then it's just about that third spot. Do you want a third striker? And if you do, which of these guys do you pick? Maybe just a little bit of talk about Watkins. I know a lot of people are looking at him because the fixtures aren't bad for Villa, especially over the next few. His stats have just never been good. Since Watkins has come into the Premier League, he's almost consistently had, and it is very consistent to be fair, because I look at him all the time, especially in previous seasons. I've really enjoyed owning Watkins. His non-penalty expected goal involvement is almost always around 0.35. So you're not going to get a massive amount of big chances from Watkins. You're not going to get a massive amount of sort of big chances created. He'll tick along. He'll get you a goal or assist every sort of 3 games-ish, which isn't terrible, but I just think you can definitely do better. And I think for 7.2 million, he's the joint most expensive player here. I think you can probably do better than Watkins. I've got Wilson on here. I think there's a very good chance Wilson, despite Isak's injury, probably still doesn't play in game week 9. I think there's still a good chance that he sits out and sits on the bench. If he does start though, and for maybe game week 10 onwards, I think Wilson could be a fantastic own. He's almost definitely going to be on penalties. When he's fit, he tends to play 90 minutes. I don't think Isak coming back will put Wilson's minutes at risk. I think actually Wilson will play through the middle and Isak will play out on the left. And as you can see here, only 245 minutes, but pretty good expected goal involvement to start the season. And across past seasons as well, Wilson has had slightly better than Watkins. He tends to sit at about a 0.4 to 0.5 non-penalty expected goal involvement. And again, he is on penalties as well, which is a massive bonus. So I guess if I'm looking at the strikers at the moment, I think Mitrovic and Haaland should be not locked in every team, but I think they are probably the two to own. Don't forget about Gabriel Jesus. I just think with the fixtures coming up and also the blank in 12, maybe you can look for a slightly cheaper striker. So I think Haaland, Mitrovic, and then the third personally for me at the moment, I would probably go for Solanke myself if I were on Wildcard, or if you think you can use the funds. Again, I know his underlying data is not great. You're not expecting him to score every game. But with this underlying data, with the better fixtures coming up, you're maybe expecting a goal every 2 to 3 games. If you chuck a couple of penalties in there as well, he could get you technically sort of 4 or 5 attacking returns over the next 8 or 9 weeks, which would be exceptional for 5.7 million. If you're not convinced by Solanke, unfortunately, it's the very obvious pick. I think it probably makes sense to go with Tony. But maybe Mbeumo could be one to own based on the underlying data. Let me know what your front three currently looks like. And if you do have Isak, who are you transferring him to? There are also some questions, quite a few actually, around game week 12. How do we prepare for it? What do we do if we're on wildcard, not wildcard? Should we be making transfers with game week 12 in mind? So I just want to have a couple of minutes just to chat about it. If you do not know, Man City and Arsenal both blank in game week 12. They've also both got relatively tricky fixtures in the next 3 games with one decent one chucked in there. So obviously Arsenal have Tottenham and Liverpool both at home, but still tricky fixtures. And then City have Manchester United and Liverpool. You could argue that both of those, with the way that we've seen them defend this season, aren't particularly tricky. But I could quite easily see Manchester United City and Liverpool City being relatively close games. So it's, do you start selling your Arsenal assets and your City assets? Do you bench them for game week 12? So here are just a few things that I would potentially think about. It is worth noting, if you don't have your wildcard, just look at the fixtures from game week 13 onwards. So I don't have any issue with selling a couple of them, especially if you've got more than 3. But just look, for Arsenal and City, the fixtures from game week 13 onwards are really nice for them. And it's another reason why, as we'll discuss at the end of the video, I actually still really like a game week 13 wildcard. But just bear in mind, I wouldn't sell all of your City and Arsenal assets because you'll probably want them for those final 4 weeks before the World Cup. So the first thing to think about is how many Arsenal, City, West Ham and dead spots do you have combined? Now, the reason for those 4 is obviously Arsenal and City blank. West Ham play against Liverpool in game week 12. And arguably, if you've got like Bowen and Sofal, maybe Bowen isn't the end of the world, but you probably don't want to play Sofal. So if you've got loads of Arsenal, loads of City and West Ham, you're pretty much looking at it might even be worth playing a free hit. But what I would arguably try and do instead is start making transfers and try and save that free hit if possible. And then also dead spots, because if you've got like 2 Arsenal, 3 City, 2 West Ham, and then like Archer as your third striker, well then Archer can't play for you in 12 as well. So I'll take a look at your team now. Assuming you've already wildcarded, you're not wildcarding before 13, or before 12, I should say. Just think about how many of those Arsenal, City, West Ham and dead spots do you have. Ideally, by game week 12, you want no more than 3, obviously, because you can bench those 3 assets. If it's, for example, Martinelli, Cancelo, and Haaland, or like Cancelo, Haaland, and Archer, you can bench 3 of them, of course. I would say as well, you don't have to field 11. Sometimes we get so carried away with, I've got to field 11. If it's going to require a couple of hits and it's probably not worth it, you can get away with fielding 10, especially if the 10 that you've got are very good. You could probably get away with fielding 7 or 8. If they're better than someone else's 11, having less players isn't always the worst idea. So I don't think you have to field 11, but I would arguably say no more than 4 players from those sort of 4 categories there. The next thing is, do you have a suitable captain? If not, how are you planning on getting to them? So I think Salah is probably the best captaincy option in game week 12 against West Ham. If you don't have a route to Salah, start thinking about it. And if you can't get to him or you don't want to, who else are you going to captain in game week 12? Because obviously you can't captain Haaland and you can't captain anyone from Arsenal as well. So you've maybe got to start thinking about some others. Spurs play against Manchester United, which isn't particularly ideal. So it's probably Salah or a slightly riskier option. I would just start thinking about your captaincy. I've said it here again, you don't have to field 11 players and your team does not have to be perfect. You're perfectly fine playing Andreas, Williams, etc. They are fine for game week 12. So I wouldn't start taking loads of hits and start going crazy with trying to get your team perfect for game week 12. No one's team, regardless of blank game weeks, no one's team is ever perfect every week, right? Everyone will have a week where their team's not ideal. And this week in particular, a lot of people will be in that position. So don't fret if you're playing the likes of Andreas and Williams. Just get out the players that you can and accept that it might be a small red arrow if your team's not perfect for game week 12. And then the final thing is potentially just avoid transferring players in with tough fixtures in Game Week 12. So if you've not yet got Bowen, Paqueta, Sofal, for example, or other players that have trickier fixtures, or City and Arsenal players, now's probably not the time to start transferring in City and Arsenal and other players that have tricky fixtures in Game Week 12. So maybe just start thinking ahead a little bit. But I guess in general, what I'm saying here is don't worry too much about Game Week 12. Don't start changing your team massively for one single week, because it's just not worth it. If you're sacrificing your team from Game Week 9 to 11 and also from 13 onwards just to deal with Game Week 12, you're probably making a mistake there. So start thinking about it, start preparing for it, but don't stress too much. And over the next couple of weeks, we'll start to make transfers, which will put us in a good position for Game Week 12. So as you can imagine, after a second half hat-trick, even more than a second half hat-trick, it was a very quick hat-trick off the bench in Game Week 8. A lot of people are talking about Heung-min Son, and rightly so. His underlying data, as we'll see in a second, hasn't actually been that bad this season, even before Game Week 8. But he's just looked a little bit off it. And again, this is sometimes where I do think that the eye test can pick up things that stats can't. And I know a lot of people maybe get frustrated watching my videos that I'm so stats heavy. The reason I am so stats heavy is because it's difficult to present the eye test. If I sat here and just listed the players that I've enjoyed watching and the players that I think have looked good, you'll say, well, where's your evidence to support that? So I almost have to be very stats heavy in these videos, but I do also love using statistics, but sometimes the eye test does pick up certain things. And Heung-min Son this season has not quite been at it. He's not been linking up with Kane as well. He's not been making the same runs, and he's also not been finishing the chances that we saw last season. So these are some things to bear in mind, but he looked like he had a point to prove in Game Week 8. He's also looked very good on the international break as well. He whipped in a beautiful free kick too. We've been saying maybe Heung-min Son's back, and I would argue that maybe now is the time to jump on him. He's got a little confidence boost. You can't see him being benched for the next few weeks. I think Conte needs all the points he can get, and he'll want to continue to start Son after seeing what we saw in Game Week 8. So I guess the question is Son worth it? Now, if you want a comparison between Son and other premiums, go back to my most recent video. It's the transfer targets video that went live on Monday. I compared Son with all of the other premiums. This here is just to have a look at specifically Son. And what I've done is I've got Son's statistics from 21-22 season and the 22-23 season to just look at how comparable his underlying data is this season to last season. Fixtures wise, they're not great for Spurs, but he does have a few decent fixtures. And what I do like is he's got a very nice fixture in 11 and 14 where you could potentially captain him. Specifically Game Week 11, if you feel comfortable captaining Son, I would say that a Spurs asset is probably the best captaincy option. Of course, Kane is a safer captaincy and you also get penalties, but Son is very explosive and that does look like a really nice fixture there. You could arguably captain him in 10, but I think more realistically, you're going to end up captaining Haaland against Southampton at home. And in 14, I suppose the issue with captaining Son, I believe Liverpool have got Leeds, so you might potentially want to captain Salah anyway in Game Week 14 if you do own him. When we look at his underlying data, there are a few differences between sort of last season and this season. The most important one for me, and it is really worth drawing your attention to, he's not getting as many minutes this season, and that is absolutely massive because what you have to realise when I'm looking at these statistics, we're looking at statistics per 90. So I'm looking at per 90 minutes in a 90-minute set, what is his expected data? How many shots in the box is he getting, etc. But if he's not playing 90 minutes, then he's not going to get this many shots in the box and this much expected data per match because he's not playing 90. So whilst his data isn't that different between them, when you consider the fact that last season he was playing 86 minutes per appearance, whereas this season he's playing 74, that is a big difference. Now, you might say moving forward, you expect him to start to get more minutes if he starts to play better. I would probably agree with that, but you've got to remember, Richarlison is a serious issue for Son's minutes. Yes, Kulusevski will be rotated as well. Yes, Kane might get an early sub, but generally, I think Richarlison is most effective on the left, and I do think we will continue to see some early substitutions for Son. So that is worth bearing in mind. But everything else is, like I said, very comparable. Expected FPL points is almost identical per 90 minutes. Non-penalty expected goal involvement, almost identical. Expected assists slightly higher last season, so he's not quite as creative this season. Touches in the box is literally pretty much identical. Like, we're only talking about a 0.04 difference. And shots in the box, he is actually taking more shots in the box per 90 this season. So he's actually getting more involved in the action. Now, again, this is per 90. So when you actually adjust for minutes, maybe there's a slightly bigger difference. So maybe in the future we'll do stats per game, but there is probably a slightly bigger difference when you look at how many minutes he's playing this season. So yes, there has been a slight drop-off, and most importantly, the biggest drop-off is Son's conversion. His conversion rate has dropped massively. So yes, there's been a decrease in Son's performance. Do I expect that to improve now? Almost definitely, right? Son is a very sort of confidence-based player. You can see when he's got a smile on his face when he's playing well. I know some of the analytics guys don't like us talking about this, but it is something to pay attention to. Motivation, enjoyment of the game, these things do impact the way a player plays, especially from a psychological perspective. You guys know how I feel about that. So yes, I would expect an improvement in Son. When you compare him to some of the other possible options. I still think I prefer Kane, right? Kane's putting up a 0.81 non-penalty expected goal involvement this season, which is better than Son. So that's something to bear in mind, that we might actually see something slightly better from Kane, and he's on penalties. And also Kevin De Bruyne has been exceptional this season. And I do believe in game week 9 and game week 12, Salah is the best captaincy option. So when you consider the other options you've got, especially when you pay attention to captaincy, and when you look at Kane maybe instead of Son, I don't think Son's essential by any means. But if you're questioning and asking me, can I go for Son now on wildcard? Should I transfer him in? I don't dislike that at all. Just bear in mind that obviously there has been a slight drop off so far this season. You're hoping and expecting his conversion rate to go back up, as we've seen in previous seasons, and also maybe just a slight uptick in both minutes and expected data as well. So I know a lot of you have wildcarded already, probably most of you watching this, but this section will still be useful whether you've wildcarded or not. But specifically for all of those people, and there were quite a few questions around when is the best time to use your wildcard if you don't want to use it in 9. Here is the list of like sort of fixture swings that we've got and potential places that you might want to use it. Just a reminder, between game week 16 and 17, so before 17, after 16, we do have around 6 weeks for the World Cup. And in those 6 weeks, we're all going to have unlimited transfers. So it is essentially another wildcard, but you have to obviously use that between 16 and 17. So we're calling it unlimited transfers. There won't be any price rise. You'll be able to tinker throughout the World Cup, but just make sure you don't lose any team value on your players by moving them in and moving them out. We'll discuss more of that after game week 16. So basically, you've got to play this first wildcard before game week 16. So I would argue probably still I prefer game week 9. So if you don't want to play it in 9, that's absolutely fine. We've spoken about on multiple occasions the benefits of using it in 8 or 9, but assuming that you're deciding not to use it in 9, here are my top 3. So we'll go with third first. I think the third best time to use it is probably game week 10. Now, the reason I say that is you're still probably jumping on the same players as a game week 8 and game week 9 wildcard. But what you can sometimes do, if you just delay your wildcard a week or two after when the majority play their wildcard, what you can sometimes do is basically correct the mistakes that the players have made before you. So, for example, we might have brought in a certain player that didn't do really well. We might have overlooked someone. And what you can do if you wildcard a couple of weeks later is sort out those mistakes. So whereas I might be scrambling and doing like a -4 to bring in Zaha to get Salah back, to remove this player, to get this player in, people might be removing Isak due to his injury, maybe moving Kevin De Bruyne to Salah or Son. You can actually jump on some of these and you don't have to take a hit to do so. So I quite like it for those reasons. Again, you're probably targeting most of the players that we've targeted from sort of game week 8 and game week 9. Probably the main difference is you're probably going to jump on at least 2, probably 3 Crystal Palace players because they've got their blank from 8 and their game against Chelsea in 9 out the way, and then they've just got a really nice clean run to the World Cup. But other than that, you're probably doing very similar to what we did in game week 8 and game week 9. I think the second best time to use it is actually to use it basically as a free hit. So remember, we've got unlimited transfers in game week 17, before game week 17. So what you can actually do with your wildcard is use it as a free hit in 16. So again, you are permanently changing your team when you wildcard, but because you then have unlimited transfers in 17, it's pretty much used as a 1-week free hit. And again, I think sometimes this is a bit of a waste of a wildcard. I think the benefit of a wildcard is that it can give you gains over like 5 or 6 weeks. So if I play my wildcard in game week 8, I'm playing it in 8 because I think it can give me a boost from game week 8 to about game week 13. When you do it like this, you're only getting a 1-week boost, but what you are being able to do is really target game week 16. And there are some really nice fixtures for the likes of Liverpool, Spurs, Bournemouth, West Ham and Palace, and teams such as Fulham, Brentford, Leeds, Villa, Chelsea, who you might have some players from, don't have the best fixtures. So that's something to bear in mind, that you could potentially just target 16 with an almost extra free hit there. But probably the best time to play it alongside game week 9 is game week 13. Now, the reason for this is, remember, you have the blank in game week 12 for City and Arsenal. And also, I would argue that Arsenal and City, and to some extent Liverpool, have pretty tricky fixtures up until game week 13. But from game week 13 onwards, they all have really nice fixtures for those final 4 weeks before the World Cup. And then again, you are getting 4 good weeks from your wildcard team. And even the likes of Spurs, their fixtures improve slightly. You've got Palace and Everton that you can jump on as well. And you can actually move out your players from Leicester, Newcastle and Chelsea, who have got slightly trickier fixtures. So at the end of the day, it's completely up to you. It's very team dependent, and it's also dependent on like your management style. I would say 13 is probably best. 16 is really nice if you want to play a slightly different wildcard and you enjoy the idea of having a free hit before the World Cup. And then 10 is pretty good if you kind of do want to go in 8 and 9, but you maybe just want to wait 1 more week to see some of the trends and different players that you might want to bring in. If you haven't yet used your wildcard, let me know down below when you plan on using it. And if you have used it, let me know when you used it and if you're happy that you used it at that point. So just to finish up, guys, we're going to do just a few quick fire other questions asked. If you do want to ask me these questions every single week, follow me over on Twitter at FPL__raps. That was perfectly timed above my head. If you're still watching this video, can I just ask you to do 3 things? Number 1, could you please like the video? I do massively appreciate it, and it helps to spread the video to other people. Number 2, please do subscribe. We're trying to hit 35,000 subscribers as soon as possible, and I do really appreciate the support. And number 3, drop a comment down below. Say whatever you want to in the world. It just helps to feed the algorithm gods, and I do really appreciate it. So try and do those 3 things if you're still watching. But these final few questions are ones that maybe weren't as popular, but I did still want to address. The first question is the best goalkeeper combination on Wildcard. I think you've maybe got like 3 options. The first is you go for Ward and Everson, and you back the fact that Leicester have really good fixtures, and you save quite a bit of money. I think probably the best one in my opinion, because it's cheap but also good, is Gaeta and then Ward, or Gaeta and Everson, whichever combo you want to go for. I think there you get a keeper who plays for a good defense with good fixtures coming up in Gaeta, and if you do want to ever rotate him out or he loses his place for some reason, you've still got the cheaper Leicester keeper that you think is going to start in the future games. So that would be my favourite. And then outside of that, you can just go for like a Pope and a cheaper keeper again. That's absolutely fine as well if you want to go sort of 5 million and above. I do also like Fabianski as well if you're not convinced by like a Pope and Trippier double up. So maybe you've already got Trippier, maybe look at Fabianski as a secret weapon there. I think he could be decent as well. But for me, it would be Gaeta and then a cheaper Leicester keeper. The second question is, would you switch KDB, Son to Salah if you have money in the bank? So a lot of people wildcarded or set their teams up so that they could go from KDB/Son to Salah in game week 9. Would I still do that? I think I would. I still think Salah's probably the best captaincy option this week. And I think if you plan for it, just follow through with that. You knew the fixtures that they've got. You knew that KDB and Son were good options. If you plan for it, I would just go through with that plan and I would bring Salah in. What about for a hit? Definitely not. I think it's pretty close between Salah, KDB and Son over the next few weeks. I think the thing that makes me lean towards Salah is, like I said, I think he's the best captaincy option in 9 and 12, but it's definitely not worth a hit. That could easily backfire in any given week. So, yep, I'd do it for free if you've got the money in the bank, but I wouldn't be taking a hit for it personally. The next question was around Perisic. Is it time to sell? Should you hold him? To be honest, we've always known what Perisic is. He's a bit of a rotation risk. He's got great threat going forward, but Tottenham aren't the best defence in the league. So, I think with the fixtures coming up, with the fact that he could be rotated a little bit, I think you'll probably find selling Perisic if you want to, but equally, you could start him every single week and he could get you massive returns. So I guess I'm going to sit on the fence and say I don't mind either way. If I had Perisic and had nothing else to do with my team, I would probably do Perisic down to like a cheap Crystal Palace defender or something around that. I would probably take some money out of the defence to allow you to get some of the really exciting attackers with good fixtures coming up, but I don't think you need to sell Perisic. I think you're fine starting him against Arsenal and for future game weeks as well. The next question is Trent or Cancelo if you can only own one, and if you own one, is there a point that you would maybe make the switch? I think on Wildcard, I would still just about lean towards Cancelo because City are the better defence, and I think they've got equally good fixtures up until 12. And then I would maybe look to move Cancelo to Trent in game week 12. But the thing is, from game week 13 onwards, you're probably going to want a City defender anyway. So I think you probably just pick the one you want and stick with them. If you can get both in, it probably is worth it. But I would probably lean towards, if you're going to make the switch, I would own Cancelo for the next few and then switch to Trent around sort of 12, 13. But I still think that they're both fantastic options and you probably can't go wrong with either of them. And then the final question is around Maddison. Would you take a hit to bring in Maddison this week? I do genuinely think Maddison will be one of the top scorers this week. I do expect him to get an attacking return. The issue you always have with a hit is if a player gets one attacking return and the player that you took out or the one that you would have played gets you 2 points, you're pretty much only making the hit back. With bonus, you might make a couple of points. But what you've got to bank on is that the player that you're taking out or that you would have played instead is going to blank. You need that to happen. And then you pretty much need 2 returns from Maddison. So I'm going to leave the ball in your court. Do you think the player you're taking out or that you would have played instead is going to blank? Step 1. Step 2, do you think Maddison will get 2 returns or more? If you think the answer to both of those questions is yes, I would probably bring Maddison in. And to be honest, this is the way that I make decisions every single week, right? It's about the player going out, the player that you would have played, and also how many returns you think the player coming in is going to get. The thing is that I would say around Maddison is that he's got really nice fixtures over the next sort of 5, 6, 7 weeks. So I think you could argue that whilst this specific week you might not make that many points, the fact that you own him also for Bournemouth in 10 and moving forward for some of the other fixtures, it might be worth taking a hit now, getting him in before he continues to rise in price, and then just settling with your team. So I don't mind a hit for Maddison. Just something to think about for you there. If you have any other questions that you want me to answer that haven't been discussed in this video, please do drop the comments down below and I will do my very best to answer as many of you as possible. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 9 preview. We answered tons of questions there. Probably a slightly longer video than usual, but I do hope you enjoy the sort of in-depth content. We're trying to keep it fresh on this channel. We're trying to give you as much sort of detailed analysis as possible. So hopefully you do enjoy it. If you did enjoy the video, as I said in the previous section, please do drop a like. Please do subscribe. Please do comment. And also a fourth one, which we don't really mention very often, please turn on notifications as well. If you turn on notifications, you know when my videos go live, and I tend to answer more comments sort of in the first half an hour to hour of a video going live. So if you have notifications on, watch the video, drop a comment. You're much more likely to get your comment replied to. Until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.